In the heart of Hollywood, where cinema legends never lose their shine, an incredible and emotional meeting took place that changed everything for two generations. A young man from a famous family astonishes his childhood idol by gifting him a luxurious off-road vehicle, and what started as a simple gesture of gratitude transforms into a deep and touching story. This day began as usual for Jack Martin, the 94-year-old actor and director, renowned in Hollywood for decades of his creative work. His home was filled with awards and memories, yet a sense of emptiness lingered. While Jack was enjoying his morning coffee, a knock at the door abruptly broke the peace. Opening the door, he saw a young courier holding a letter sealed with gold. Jack raised an eyebrow and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a finely handwritten message: "Dear Mr. Martin, although we are not personally acquainted, your films have become an inseparable part of my childhood and heart. I would like to meet you in person to thank you for the lessons your works have given me about strength, honor, and humanity. Best wishes, Arthur Stevenson." Jack was surprised, immediately recognizing the name. Arthur Stevenson, the son of the newly elected president, wanted to meet with him. This was astonishing. After a moment of contemplation, Jack decided to call the number provided in the letter. The main voice on the other end was calm but professional. "Mr. Stevenson will be pleased to meet with you, Mr. Martin." The next day, a huge convoy of black off-road vehicles appeared on Jack's property. Guards stepped out first, carefully inspecting the area. Then a young man dressed in an elegant dark blue suit emerged from one of the cars. It was Arthur, the 18-year-old son of the president, radiating quiet confidence. Jack couldn't help but admire how calm and well-mannered the young man was. "Good afternoon, Mr. Martin," Arthur said, smiling and extending his hand. Jack smiled, shaking it. "Just Jack will do." "And you're taller than I expected," he added, which immediately made Arthur laugh. They sat in the living room, where posters from the films that made Jack a star, such as Ruthless and Criminal Code, hung on the walls. Arthur, enchanted by the atmosphere, couldn't hide his admiration. "You know, Jack, when I was little, I used to sneak away from my parents and watch your films for hours. My parents didn't always approve, but your characters taught me more than any school could," Arthur shared. Jack couldn't help but be moved. It had been so long since he had heard such words from someone who truly understood the depth of his work. As they continued their conversation, Jack asked, "What made you reach out to me now, Arthur?" Arthur paused for a moment before answering, "Growing up in the public I was tough. But your films helped me find courage. You showed how to face hardships with dignity. I just wanted to thank you for that." Jack's tone shifted, and with tenderness, he said, "I never thought my work could mean so much to someone like you." Before they continued, Arthur took a small leather notebook from his pocket. "This," he said, handing it to Jack, "is a list of lessons I learned from your films. I thought you might find it interesting." Jack felt his heart swell with emotion as he flipped through the pages. This young man, under such immense public pressure, took the time to honor him in such a deep way. "Thank you, Arthur," Jack barely managed to say, his voice choked with emotion. But this was only the beginning of the surprises Arthur had prepared. When Jack regained his composure after the emotional meeting, he was ready for yet another pleasant surprise. Arthur had gathered a team of automotive designers and commissioned a custom off-road vehicle made specifically for Jack. It was a vintage design combining modern comfort and the essence of Jack, a man who had always stood by his principles. Arthur arrived at Jack's house with the gift in hand, and as they took a ride together, Jack felt how this car reflected everything he had achieved. It was a gift that showed the depth of the respect and gratitude Arthur felt for Jack. "This is for you, Jack," Arthur said as they arrived at a scenic coastline. Jack couldn't find the words. He hadn't expected such a gesture. "You didn't have to do this, Arthur," Jack replied, once again moved. They drove around the city, and in that moment, Jack felt that this wasn't just a ride, but a bond that spanned across years and generations. If their first meeting was filled with emotion, the next became a symbol of their unbreakable connection. Arthur continued to prepare new surprises, which over time further strengthened their friendship, and this was just the beginning of their shared journey through the years, where each left a mark on the other's life. After Arthur and Jack spent several hours talking, walking, and discussing old movies, a true brotherly understanding developed between them. Arthur turned out to be very open and willing to share his feelings, and Jack, in turn, became a real mentor to him. After their walk, Arthur invited Jack to dinner at one of the best restaurants in the city. "Did you ever think that after all these years of fame and career, you'd be so important to someone, Jack?" Arthur asked as they sat at the table, enjoying exquisite dishes. Jack paused for a moment. "If someone had told me that when I was young, I would have laughed," he replied. "But now I realize that the true meaning isn't how many people know you, but how you can influence the people you meet. And you, Arthur, are showing me how this influence can be even stronger than I thought." The evening continued, and their conversation grew deeper. Arthur shared his plans for the future, and Jack, in turn, told him how important it is to stay true to oneself, no matter how big and public your life becomes. "You have a lot of potential, Arthur," Jack said, "but what matters most is how you use your popularity and resources to help others. That is the true essence of greatness." Arthur smiled, feeling that every word Jack said not only gave him advice but truly reflected everything he wanted to follow in his life. "Maybe that's my goal, to use everything I have to leave my mark on the world, not just through my own achievements, but by supporting those who need it," Arthur replied. And they raised their glasses to symbolize their new friendship and shared goal. However, the next day, everything changed. That evening, when Arthur returned home, he received an unknown call. The voice on the other end of the line was sharp and tense. "Arthur, we have a problem. Your parents are in danger." Arthur's heart sank. He immediately understood that this was no ordinary threat. It was the beginning of something much more serious. "What happened?" he asked, unable to hide his anxiety. "We can't reveal the details yet, but get ready for unexpected changes. You need to be prepared for something bigger than just an attack on your parents." These words made Arthur realize that his life was just beginning to take on darker tones. He hung up the phone and took a deep breath. What he had feared had become a reality. His family was in danger, and everything he had built could be destroyed. He immediately set off for his parents' house. But as he rushed through the city, Jack, who had felt something strange, received a message from Arthur. He decided to help and, without hesitation, got into his new SUV. "I'm with you, Arthur. Wherever you are, I'll be there," he wrote, hoping that this simple gesture would be a support for Arthur in moments of danger. However, Arthur was already too deep into the situation to rely solely on help. He quickly changed his plans and headed with his security team to the family estate, where all his relatives and close ones were gathering for an emergency meeting. His parents, of course, were not used to such situations, but they knew that when Arthur was involved in something serious, it was no joke. When Jack realized how great the threat to Arthur's family was, he decided that together they could overcome any difficulty. To ensure the safety of Arthur and his loved ones, Jack developed a strategy that included not only security but also using his connections in the film industry to find potential enemies. But the more Arthur learned, the greater the personal threat to him became. Someone from his inner circle might be guilty. All these intrigues were becoming more dangerous every day. Only with Jack's help, their efforts, and unwavering courage could they hope for safety, which required enormous sacrifices. As soon as Arthur and Jack arrived at the estate, the situation became even more tense. Arthur's parents were anxious and couldn't understand who could be behind the attack. Everyone was on high alert, security was checking every corner of the estate, and Jack was trying to find any clues that could point to those responsible for the threat. "We need to act quickly," Jack said, looking at Arthur, whose face reflected the depth of his concern. "Finding who's behind this is just the beginning. You can't ignore any sign." Arthur looked at him and nodded. He was grateful for the support, but his thoughts kept returning to his family. His parents, though influential in business, had never been familiar with such situations. Unknown people had managed to infiltrate their lives, and now they were under threat. "We need to figure out who did this and why. But first and foremost, we have to ensure safety," Arthur said. "We need to secure all exits here and move my parents to a safe place." Meanwhile, Jack started using his contacts. He called one of his old acquaintances working in law enforcement and asked for help. Every move was under close scrutiny and they couldn't afford any mistakes. However, the situation was not as simple as it seemed at first. At that moment, a new message arrived, adding even more questions. Arthur received a text that was encrypted: "Your game is not over. Those who help you have already become part of this game." "What does this mean?" Arthur said as he showed Jack the message. "Can we trust everyone here?" Jack looked at the message and thought, this could be another step in their plan. Maybe there's someone in our circle who's not on our side. This was a heavy blow. If they couldn't even trust their own people, then who was truly a friend? They began checking the connections of all the guards, acquaintances, and even business partners of Arthur. No one seemed entirely safe. The next morning, after a sleepless night, Arthur decided to act decisively. He contacted other members of his team, gathered all the necessary information, and began to figure out who was behind the manipulation. But the more he dug, the more he felt that this was not just an incident. Someone was trying to block his path, doing everything they could to destroy his career and personal life. "Now I understand why all of this is happening," Arthur said to Jack. "This isn't just a threat. It's an attempt to convince me that I no longer have control. They want me to give up." Jack, who already had experience with similar situations, replied, "Never give up, even when it seems like everything is lost. You're not alone in this fight, and I'll help you." But the problem was not just finding out who was behind the threats. It was important to understand why this was happening and how Arthur could respond. This wasn't just a battle for the safety of his family. It was a struggle to maintain his place in a world where he was big and important. Meanwhile, new messages came one after another. Everything Arthur received only worsened the situation. He realized that this wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of a big game, where every move would be critical. Arthur would have to make a choice: could he keep his loved ones safe and regain control of his life? Or would there come a time when even the best friends could become enemies? Jack and Arthur both knew one thing: more dark twists awaited them, and their fight was just beginning. Arthur and Jack headed to the company's central office, hoping to find new clues to the mystery. They discussed every step, every suspicion, trying to figure out who was behind the threats. The office was empty, the tense silence only intensified the feeling that something was wrong. All the employees were absent, and the security looked suspiciously attentive to every move they made. Something's off here. It's impossible for all the employees to be on vacation or business trips at the same time. They are hiding something, Jack said, looking around at the empty workstations and offices that had been filled with people just hours earlier. Arthur felt the pressure growing stronger with each passing minute. He turned to the security system, but strangely, all the video footage had been deleted. This meant one thing: someone had access to the system and knew exactly how to eliminate the evidence. This was planned, Arthur said, staring at the monitor with the empty camera screens. He decided to contact one of his trusted people, Lisa. She was an experienced analyst and could help detect any suspicious financial or corporate changes. Arthur called her, and she quickly promised to come, although she confirmed that the situation with the technical resources was complicated. "We need a clear plan, Lisa," he said when she finally arrived. "Every time we take a step forward, it seems like someone is several steps ahead of us." Lisa gained access to internal documents, checking all the accounts and transactions of the company while Jack examined the other offices. All traces that could indicate external connections or deals with dubious individuals were either masked or erased. Then Lisa noticed one thing: suspicious payments were made through one of the accounts, leading to unknown companies and individuals. "This is big," Lisa said as she showed Arthur the results. "We are dealing with a person or a group with access to all the critical points, and they are trying to manipulate the situation to make themselves look innocent." Meanwhile, messages from their enemies kept arriving. "Your game continues, and you've long been part of my plan," one of the new texts read, again making them uneasy. They began to realize that this situation wasn't just about corruption or business rivalry. It was a game where Arthur was merely a puppet. The decision was clear: they needed to act decisively, but without haste. Arthur and Jack knew that with every step, their enemies were becoming more cunning. They continued the investigation, trying to figure out who was behind this grand plan and what steps they needed to take to regain control. At that moment, another person joined them, someone who could change the course of events. It was Michael, Arthur's former partner, who seemed to have long been out of the game. He appeared in the office, hiding his true intentions. But his eyes spoke volumes. He was definitely part of something much bigger. "I know what's going on," Michael said, looking at everyone. "I can't tell you everything, but I warn you, don't trust everyone around you. This is a higher game." His words barely sank in for Arthur and Jack, but they understood one thing: the solution was closer than they had thought. Secret deals, suspicious financial moves, and now a conspiracy with an old partner, all of it pointed to one important moment. Someone from the most important people in their lives was part of this network. "We are going to the end," Arthur said with determination. "Now, it's not just about finding out who's behind this. We need to know why it happened and how we can regain control." This was the beginning of a new stage. The battle for power and safety wasn't over, but Arthur felt ready for whatever came next. Each new day brought more questions, and the answers seemed increasingly unclear. Arthur, Jack, and Lisa did not stop their search, working tirelessly in the hope of finding the key to this tangled maze. And when it seemed like there was nowhere else to look, the answer came unexpectedly. Michael, the former partner, seemed more and more unpredictable. His behavior became odd, and one evening he invited Arthur to a confidential meeting. "There's something you need to know," Michael said, before revealing a group of influential people who controlled not only their business but also political circles. And who was behind everything that had been happening. "You have no idea how far this goes," Michael added, looking at Arthur with a serious expression. "All these threats, all the manipulation, it's part of a bigger game, and you've become a pawn. Now that you know all this, they'll want to destroy you." Arthur was stunned, but he had no choice but to move forward. With the help of Jack and Lisa, they traced the unknown mastermind behind these events, a powerful businessman whose name had long been forgotten in the corridors of their world. More and more pieces of the puzzle fell into place, and Arthur realized that his life had become part of a game where not only business but also control over the country's future was at stake. Finding out who was behind it all became their main goal. Finally, after months of hard searches and dangerous meetings, they gathered enough evidence. The entire scheme was exposed, and when they uncovered the main organizer, one of the wealthiest and most influential people in the country, his name became known. And while the battle had been won, Arthur understood that you can never be sure who is really controlling the situation. In the world of big money and influence, things change too quickly, and even the most successful can end up being just a pawn on the chessboard. But despite all this, he remained alive. And that was the greatest achievement of his life. Arthur looked at his allies, Lisa and Jack, and said, "We've won, but this game isn't over." And although all the serious trials were behind them, he knew that many challenges awaited him. But he was no longer afraid. Now, he was ready for anything.